Very good. We're on part 4. It's page 126. We're still continuing on with tissues, histology, and we've come upon the section related to glandular tissue. And they're presenting us with, in this case, exocrine gland tissue that is to say we're directing the activity in a particular direction. Okay, so here is something that's referred to as amerocrine gland tissue. That is to say, it's secreting based on little vesicles that are releasing the product that's being made by each of these cells. The product is entering here. This could be enzymes, for instance, in the kidney, or rather in the pancreas, pancreatic enzymes that are useful in metabolizing food in the small intestine. So let's imagine that that's the case. In this case, they are secreting the material. It's going to a duct and then going on to its location. There is a somewhat less common form of glandular tissue that is considered holocrine. In the human body, the only definitive example for us are sebaceous glands, that is to say the glands, the oily glands that are associated with our hair follicles, right? And so this is our personal lanolin, you could say, right? So we're actually collecting the sebaceous output of sheep when we're collecting lanolin. I don't know if you're aware of that. But anyway, we have our own lanolin, so to speak, and it's the output here of the sebaceous glands. And it's, in this case, it's not just the oily product that the cells make, but it's the entire cell that's being released, and hence it's referred to as a holocrine. The whole cell ruptures, okay, and is delivered. In some ways, that's why some of these glands tend to get a little bit stuck with whiteheads and blackheads and so on. The pores where the hairs are can be when the hair is recycling its growth cycle and there's no hair in the particular follicle, but there's plenty of these sebaceous glands, then they might produce a little plug in that area, and the hair cell that's trying to grow gets sort of like turned around a little bit. So that's the cause of whiteheads and blackheads. Okay, so you can see here we have rapid mitotic division. So we have these mitotic figures down here, and the cells are reproducing quickly because it's the entire cell that's being delivered when we think of delivery to the outside world. Okay, so there's that. Then we come on to a somewhat new topic here in histology, which is connective tissues. Connective tissues, I would like to sort of have a quick little overview here of just a little diagram that, in my mind, this helps me think through what is a connective tissue. A connective tissue include things like bone, cartilage. There's something called connective tissue proper. So in some cases, these are fibroblasts. In some cases, these are osteoblasts. They're whatever make the tissue, okay? So in some ways, the tissue itself is not composed so much of the cells, but the output of the cells, right? So the bone is not mostly cellular. It's actually mostly matrix. And the same thing with cartilage, and the same thing with tendons and ligaments. They're not mostly the cell, they're mostly the secretions of the cell. Okay, so what is matrix then is over here we have one aspect of matrix, which is the fibers. We have collagen, elastin, reticulin. There's a number of different protein fibers common to connective tissue. Then we have the ground substance in which they are residing. The ground substance is a chemical substance which could be not bound together. That is to say, it's liquid and sort of watery, and there's a flow through. Or it could be a solid type of thing. So the more solid it is, then sometimes it's mineralized, as is the case particularly with bone tissue. So in some cases, it's not quite so mineralized, as is the case with cartilage. Okay, and then sometimes it's just liquid in between the fibers, and which is the case with tendons and ligaments. Okay, so that's that situation. And then we'll go into more detail over here, and we'll, how are we situated? Here we go. The common characteristics, they want to tell us some things about here. We're actually looking at page 127 in case you need to find it. The connective tissue, and so they talk about the main types of connective tissue out here. And they begin with things like connective tissue proper is where we'll begin, and then we'll press on to cartilage, and then we'll press on to bones. Eventually we'll talk about blood, but we're not going to talk about blood this semester. It'll be next semester. Okay, so you'll have to wait for that one. Nevertheless, there's a number of things that are common features. You'll be using this particular tissue for support. Of course, if you have bones, that's going to be skeletal support and locomotion. If it's tendons and ligaments, it's going to be attaching the muscles to the bones. If it's going to be fat, which is also a connective tissue, it'll be insulating and also storing of energy. Okay. It's important to note, by the way, that we store calories as potential fuel for certain things, but we don't store sleep. Are you aware of that? We don't store sleep, and so we actually need sleep. It's not a common feature here, not a common finding, or Americans don't bow to that so easily. Anyways, common characteristics of connective tissue. They have a common origin. Generally speaking, there is something called mesenchyme, which is the pluripotent tissues found in the mesoderm. Okay, so all of these come more or less from not more or less, they do come from mesoderm. So the bones, the muscles, the cartilages, tendons, ligaments, and so on. Okay, then they have a varying degree of vascularity. It turns out that bones are highly vascularized, and that if you break a bone, you will bleed. That's going to be one of the features of a broken or a fractured bone, even if it's not very much broken. If it's just slightly fractured, it'll nevertheless bleed because you'll be interrupting a artery and a vein. And there'll be some pain involved, too, because they have nerves running right through even the densest parts of the bone. So it hurts to bump a bone. Some of you probably are aware of that. Cartilage, on the other hand, is avascular, and it has a very entirely different way of, how shall I say, engaging life, and it doesn't heal so readily, whereas bone does heal very readily. Let's get that. Okay, so there we go. So then we have, we do have extracellular matrix, as I was mentioning to you before, that the matrix is really mainly what makes the tissue. The cells contribute to that matrix and build the matrix and, how shall I say, weave the matrix. There's a lot of clinicians that try to inject collagen, for instance, into the skin of people with wrinkles, and it has a very limited amount of success because it's being done by the physician and it's not being done by the fibroblast or the cell that actually knows how to produce the polymer of collagen and weave it properly. So there are little cells that know how to weave. Kind of an interesting detail. Okay, so let's press on to the actual examples over here. They begin actually with this example, which is an artistic rendition of areolar tissue, and it begins with connective tissue proper, and it sort of gives you some of the broad elements. Since this is an artistic rendition, then we can observe, okay, this is loose connective tissue, also known as areolar. Some people actually say areolar. Okay, so you have your choice, areolar, or just simply loose CT. Okay, I tend to go with that expression. This is also an area because if you were to sort of look at the back of your hand and notice that we have the skin will be able to move across the back of your hand, that you can move the skin around. That means that underlying the skin is this loose connective tissue. This is an area which can have subcutaneous fat. Fat invades preferentially the loose connective tissue. Sometimes it's dimorphic. That is to say, females have to have, how shall I say, subcutaneous fat in the butt and the thighs a little bit more, sometimes in the breast region. Males have subcutaneous fat a little bit more in the waistline. And so there's different protocols there for dimorphic distribution of fat. Okay, then look at these big collagen bundles. And there's capillaries running through. And we have a number of different cell types that are engaged in the project. Okay, so that's the idea here of loose connective tissue. Then we have the actual picture of it. Let's take a look at that picture over here. So this is one example. I have a number of examples, but this is one of many. And again, we have something here that is being represented, and they're showing us that it's usually between tissues, between major, so it's between muscles. If you were to massage deeply in your muscles, you would get in between tissues and find this. Let's pick this up in the next section.